Did you know that none of us were ever meant to live life alone? None of us were ever meant to live life alone, especially when it comes to our Christian life. I think of the New Testament especially. Throughout the entire New Testament, when it talks about the church especially, it talks way more about the church doing things as a group, in a group context, in a body context, rather than an individual who's trying to become more like Jesus in and of himself and on his own. It's really interesting. One of the places in Ephesians chapter 4 is just one of the places where it talks about us doing life as a group rather than an individual. And in verse 15 and 16 of Ephesians 4, it says that we are supposed to speak the truth in love. We are to grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint with which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. According to God's Word, we are way more functional. We do things the way that God has purpose for us to do as a group way more than as an individual. We're meant to do this as a group. You read places like Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25, it says this, "And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." You caught a couple of the words in there. It says one another. We're to stir up one another. We're to encourage one another. The Bible is full, especially the New Testament, about the church, the body of Christ, with all of these one another statements. Love one another, comfort one another, encourage one another, admonish one another, and so on. These are called reciprocal phrases, which means that I am doing this for and with you as you are doing this for and with me together. We were never meant to do our Christian life alone. So, take a look around you. Just look around you right now. Here are at least some of the people that God has strategically placed in your life to help you grow, to stir you up for love and good works, and has strategically, believe it or not, strategically placed you in their life. If you're feeling like, I'm inadequate, I'm here to help these other people, I don't even know what I'm doing, that's good. It actually is good, because none of us are even supposed to feel adequate in and of ourselves. That's how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to know that we have no way of doing this alone, and so it's only together and with Jesus Christ and with His Spirit living in us and working through us that we can live out this life. If you're wondering now, well, then what do I do first? What's my first step? I actually take one of those one another phrases and just say this: get to know one another. That's your first one. Just get to know one another, which means that you open up and just take some time to let somebody else get to know you, and you take some time to listen and really get to know someone else. We're going to actually give you some opportunity to do what we call a God story, your God story, which about 5 minutes or so that we'll give each one of us, and we're just going to share how God just grabbed a hold of our life and brought us to the place where we're at. As you're doing that, when that does come, and that time does come in your life group to do that, as you're doing that, just listen to somebody else's story and celebrate with them. Celebrate what God's done in their life. And then celebrate even the fact that what God has done in your own life. And then do this. Start celebrating the fact that God has done a work in all of your lives. It's going to be amazing. You're going to find a lot of differences. You're going to find some similarities. You're going to find a lot of dysfunctions. You're going to be sharing some dysfunctions. You're not going to be sharing a perfect story. That's okay. It actually encourages me more to know that God Himself has His plan to use all of us with all of our differences and dysfunctions in order to help us all grow. Only God can do something like that with a group of people. So be excited about that. And just watch, over these next several weeks, watch how God will use every single one of you to fulfill His plan to grow each other. You know, no two individual Christians are alike. We all know that. No two people are alike, exactly alike anyway. And the same thing is true about Christianity. But even with our differences, and we know there are so many differences that we all have, we do understand that if I'm a follower of Jesus and you're a follower of Jesus, we do have some things in common. For instance, if I'm a follower of Jesus and you are too, we all have the same goal of becoming more like Jesus. That's something that we share in common, even among all of the differences. The same thing's true with life groups. You're a life group. You're sitting in this room, and believe me, there is no other group that is going to be like your group. It's awesome. You have distinctions that are not going to be shared with anyone else. But at the same time, if you're a group of followers of Jesus, and there's another group of followers of Jesus, you do have some things in common. For instance, the same thing that's true about us individually becoming more like Jesus is true of us as a group. There's a group of people in this room that if you're followers of Jesus, you have the goal of becoming more like Jesus, and other groups around everywhere else, around the neighborhood, around this country, whatever, that are meeting together have the same goal. That's just one example. So we have what's called a primer that we're having groups go through that just shows the common things, even though groups are different, the common things between every group, mostly about our purpose and about our mission. And I've painted before. I'm actually going through a lot of redecorating in our house right now, and we're doing a lot of painting. My wife actually does most of the painting, but she will use what's called, and we all know this, it's called a primer. It's when you put on the wall, it's a primer coat that you put on the wall, and it's a foundational coat that you can then, after the primer is applied, you can put anything else, any other covering on it. So that's kind of why we're calling this the primer. It's a foundational coat that we're going to give to every life group so we understand what are the foundational things that then, when we understand that foundation and we apply that in our groups, we're able to paint whatever we want over it. Whatever is distinct about your group, however you want to carry out this purpose and mission is going to be totally different than other groups, but we all have the same quote-unquote primer. That's what we're looking at here in the next several weeks. What does that primer look like for all of our? All right, so what is this primer that we're all going to apply to every group? What are these foundational purposes and missions that every group has in common? Well, let me suggest to you a couple things. The first thing is that all of us, no matter what group, no matter what shape our group takes, we all have the purpose of becoming more like Jesus. Intentionally becoming more like Jesus. Maybe some of you have heard of this. I don't know. It's called the anatomy of a disciple. It's something that we've come up with as just one way of being able to analyze and just see just a picture of what a disciple of Jesus really looks like. And I just drew it up here for us. It's somebody who's humbly submitted and biblically formed, and you keep going out and all of these different aspects in your life, and you'll see all these aspects are actually aspects that Jesus displayed in his life, and we're intentionally becoming more like Jesus in our life in the anatomy of a disciple. But when I think of that phrase, anatomy of a disciple, I don't know about you, but I think about it as an individual. How am I becoming more like Jesus as a disciple? And that's one way that we're going to be looking at it. Your group is going to exist to help every single one of us individually become more like Jesus. But there's another aspect to it as well. Remember, we're in this together, and God's purpose is that we don't do this individually. What if we looked at the anatomy, and we're going to be doing this over the next several weeks, the idea of becoming more like Jesus isn't just an individual task, but it's all of us becoming more like Jesus together. In other words, as I am learning how to become more humbly submitted to God, for instance, that I'm actually going, how can I actually help all the rest of us become humbly submitted to this same God? How are we doing as a group of becoming more and more intentionally like Jesus? That's the purpose of your leader. Your leader that you have is going to intentionally be challenging every single one of us to individually become more like Jesus, but also in that process that we're going to be challenged together that as a group, how are we now becoming more morally discerning? How are we as a group becoming culturally engaged? And how are we as a group becoming an inclusive community? And how are we as a group becoming an intentional blessing, and so forth? If you're looking at this diagram and you're thinking, what do those things mean? What do those terms mean? I don't even know what an anatomy of a disciple is. That's great. That's why we have the primer. The primer is going to take us through just a snapshot of what it looks like to this anatomy of a disciple, and just get us to start thinking about what that looks like, not only as an individual, but as a group of people together. And we're excited about that. Just ask questions, make comments, just soak it in, and just see how God really works in our lives over the next several weeks of making us as a group become more and more like Jesus, not just an individual. Your group is also going to be primed, like every other group, with a common mission. It's a common mission that all of us as individuals have, but also all of us, again, as a group has, and we're able to do the purpose that God has for us much, much better as a group. And it's this mission, that we exist to help people connect to God and to each other in every neighborhood. Look, your leader, honestly, your leader is going to have a huge goal. And I'll let you know what's going on in your leader's mind right now. They're thinking, how can I help the people in this group connect to God and to each other wherever we're at? That is the goal of your leader or your leaders. Now, as they do that goal, they're going to be thinking, how can we get together and help the other people in this group, connect to God in some way, connect to each other. But remember, and I'll say this this way, that's not actually the ultimate goal. That really is the purpose to the goal. In other words, your leader wants all of us to connect to God better, to connect to each other better, so that we are stronger in fulfilling the actual mission. And the actual mission is to help other people connect to God and to each other in every neighborhood. In other words, your group exists to help all of us connect to God and to each other, so that all of us will then go out and help other people connect to God and to each other in every neighborhood. And again, just like the Nana Be a Disciple, there's an individual aspect of that, but then there's a group aspect of that. Individually, we're all going to be tasked with this mission, and hopefully just really understand this mission of how can I individually help someone else in my life connect to God and to other people where I'm at in my neighborhood. But then there's also the us, the we factor. How are we as a group? How can we as a group actually help other people connect to God and to each other in every neighborhood? If you're still asking, like, I don't even know what this mission statement means, I got questions about it, what does every neighborhood mean? That's okay. Again, that's why we have the primer. That's why we're going over this stuff over the next several weeks. It's so that we're going to take some time to actually go over every aspect of that mission. What does it actually mean to connect to God? You're going to be looking at and exploring different ways, and different ways, especially that's going to be for your group, in order to help you guys connect to God, and also help you to prepare you to help others connect to God. And you're going to be talking about different ways that you're going to connect with each other. You're going to talk about, what is every neighborhood? You're going to define that. What does every neighborhood even look like? And then you're going to discuss, what does it look like for us, for our group, to help other people connect to God and to each other in every neighborhood. So we're excited about that too. That's your mission, that's your purpose that we have no matter what your group looks like. So these are some of the common goals, the common purposes, the common mission that every group has. That's the primer. Now with that said, we're also going to take just a little bit of time to talk about just a couple of the distinctions in this group. For instance, you're going to go around and just say what you expected. What are your expectations from this group? What are you coming personally in this group for? You're going to talk about, take some time and just talk about your norm, what we call your norms. What's normal for this group? It's probably not going to be the same thing that's normal for another group. But to take a little bit of time and talk about things like, what are we going to do with childcare? Or what are meals together maybe going to look like if we do that? Where do we meet? When do we meet? How long of a time are we meeting together? Just talk about the distinctions of your group. You're going to take a few minutes and talk about that as you get this group started, so that even though your group is distinct, you're going to know what to expect out of this particular group, and what to expect with the distinctions that this particular group has. So at the conclusion of this primer, over the next few months, at the conclusion, we're going to take some time and just reflect and celebrate what God has done, not only individually, but also with this group. I hope you're excited to see what God is going to, and to hear what God is going to do with this group. I'm excited for you guys, because God is an incredible God that's going to do amazing things. Now, in the meantime, I just want to leave you with one more thing. Make it a priority to be part of this group. Make it a priority in your life to open up to other people in this group. Make it a priority that you're going to be also inviting other people to work in your life. That can be scary. But I want to just encourage you, just make it a priority, just for the next several weeks, a few months, that you're going to come, you're going to make this a priority, and just going to be investing in other people's lives, and you're going to allow them to invest in your life. It really is true, the saying really is true, especially in this case, that you're going to get out of this group what you personally want to invest into it. So invest, and then just see how God really does use a group of believers to fulfill his purpose. It's his plan, way more than an individual. Remember what I said at the beginning. We are never meant to do this alone. Have fun.